New Christianity is a book by C.S. Lewis where he discusses Christianity, and pretty much he discusses it from the term from a layman's term, or from a, what do you call it? I forget the word. I wrote it down. Well, anyways, we're gonna talk a little bit about this book because I think it's fascinating from a Christian perspective and a non-Christian perspective. I think it's a book that clears up a lot of misconceptions that either Christians may have about Christianity and the non-Christians have about Christianity. And it being the Lent season right now, we thought this would be a good time to kind of discuss it.
Sal thought this would be a good time to discuss it. I was I was very apprehensive. I do want to share that with y'all. I don't particularly care for a lot of people to know, not necessarily what I'm thinking, but what my viewpoints are on religion. Um, just because I actually grew up. I was raised in a Catholic school. Well, not raised in a Catholic school, right? But I went to a Catholic school from first through eighth grade. Excuse me, and I think that a lot of it shapes who you are, your morals and your moral values, and it's just interesting. And so when Sal told me about this book and that he wanted to discuss it and whatnot, I was apprehensive. So I think it's good. It definitely pushes me to Kaizen, to grow, I guess, in small increments and learn different stuff. So,
Um, so aside from like me suggesting it, is there any other reason you'd be reading it or looking to get out of it?
I think that having a good background, overall background in religion and understanding it rather than I'm not practicing right now, not practicing religion, I suppose. I guess that you would say that. And it it was very abrasive to me the first time that I tried listening to it. It's very quick. It's very it's a difficult read. It's not easy. The verbiage of it is uh distracting to me.
What is this one?
Yeah. And so I was like,
How, how so? Like what?
I feel like it's closer to like Shakespearean reading than it is to like a regular informational book, I guess. And before I had a lot of, so after my mom passed away, I was very, very just upset with what I had learned as a god, right? Like all of that. And so those were little boxes that were tucked away, and I didn't want to open it. It was I didn't like it. I It was very uncomfortable. Now I am definitely open to it, especially after reading it and then listening to it and reading it again and going over it. It's very honest, it's very true what they're saying, and I think that it's really cool to know the background of in Mere Christianity. You get a little bit of the background of who C.S. Lewis was and why he was able to discuss these topics from almost an outsider's perspective. Are you going to go into that one right now in the book?
Which part exactly?
Like how he was a non believer?
Oh, yeah, we can touch a little bit on everything.
Did I answer your
Most of the
question?
yeah, the one of the main reasons this is like my fourth time listening through it. I don't like to read, so I do audiobooks, but this is I think my fourth time
Jeez.
listening through, and I can't remember when the first time was. It must have been 20. Maybe this is my third year. No, I don't know. Either way, unimportant. It's more than one. And there was somebody I knew that is very, very devout Christian, And during COVID stuff, of course, everyone was kind of off their rocker a little bit, and mentioned some stuff that I didn't quite agree with. And from coming from such a Christian perspective, I was like, there's no way. I'm not a practicing Christian either, but knowing the background I have, is like, there's no way this is the Christian way of thinking. Like this specific thought that this person had, and I was like, there's no way that this. And so I knew reading the Bible would be too much for me. Like there's just too much interpretation,
Allegory.
yeah, and that type of stuff, and I wouldn't quite get the picture. And so I came across this one, and this one was almost like, I guess, an explanation, almost like footnotes to all of it.
Yeah,
And
like for dummies.
yeah.
Christianity for dummies or something.
Yeah, and even when I was in in college, I don't like a lot of old timey stuff, because I guess something about the language or the style just doesn't catch my attention. And then even in college, I had to take history like 3 times, and I even had to the third time that I passed it was when I finally got a U.S. History for Dummies book, and it explained like everything like on 5. And so I think this is kind of one of those things. Like she said, it's not an easy read, but I don't think it's as hard as the Bible. And I think in a way it's more like I said, C.S. Lewis did these as a series of radio talks, and he did it because he said he was an amateur, so not as like a full beginner, but not an expert. So he was kind of right down the middle. It was a hobby of his, kind of, and so he liked to kind of dive into it, but still kind of knew his place. That there, and he mentions that in the preface, that there's stuff that he doesn't know about, and so he couldn't answer that, but he was glad to talk about it as a layman. And so, like she says, that it's kind of a hard read. It's a lot of stuff to chew on. It gives a lot of good little like sentences that I had to like rewind and listen to again. Like, what does this mean? And then like you just had to sit there and let it
stew for a bit.
Yeah, and then it kind of starts clicking in. Like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. And I guess upon finishing the first time, I was very, I don't know, enlightened by, I guess, what it can mean, what it does mean, what it doesn't mean. And that's why I think it's stuff is something that everyone should at least try to give it a chance. Give the book a chance to see what it may clear up for you, what it may maybe bring up other questions, and so on and so on. Anything else? At least that's a intro still.
So in the preface also, it discusses what I thought was really cool. Since I have a background in science, I was like, well, all of this is just his words, right? And like his observations, which is cool because that's like scientific, right? Observing. And then he actually sent book 2. So book 2, he does it in his chapters are called books. So there's a preface, and there's book 1, which is where we're going to review-ish today. And then book 2, he sent to the to 5 different individuals, 5 different like clergy. Is that the right word for them? So like for Hinduism, he sent it to the Catholic priest, he sent it to a Christian pastor, like several different men to get their perspectives. And he said that the majority of them all agreed. There were just 2 of them that had some kind of criticism. And I forgot what the actual criticisms were, but I had highlighted it. So I read the actual book, and it's a lot. And like with Selim, but I don't know, the concreteness of it. I also like listening, but I wanted to find that part. Oh, he sent it to 4 clergymen: Anglican, Methodist, Presbyterian, Roman Catholic, asking for their criticism. The Methodist thought I had not said enough about faith, and the Roman Catholic thought I had gone rather too far about the comparative unimportance of theories in explanation of the atonement. Otherwise, all 5 of us were agreed. And so I thought that was really cool that he did that. Because it's kind of like not only just his words, but it's also backed up.
Yeah. And even with the, so that's kind of in the preface, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so I like that in the preface, he goes to kind of establish some ground rules as to what certain things mean and what, or at least not what they mean, but how he will be referring to them. And so one of the fascinating ones that I found was the word gentleman. So the word gentleman before used to be a factual term. So meaning it was somebody who had a coat of arms and owned land. So that person is a gentleman, meaning that was a fact. That person was owned or had the coat of arms and owned land. It wasn't a matter of opinion, or it wasn't something you would say as we use the term now. So now we use the term gentleman as someone who does something honorable, or as someone who meant well, and that is much more opinion based. So that being the context of how you're using things, and especially since these talks were back in the 40s over the radio, so he tries to clear up a lot of these things as how he'll be using terms so that there's no confusion about it. And so that was a fascinating one to me. And I guess that's what he tries to do there a little bit, to establish the ground rules and say that this is pretty clear, at least like we're in kind of consensus for the most part as to what all this stuff means.
I'm going to add to that too. What I really liked about it's in his last paragraph. He says, to give a little tiny bit of background, he says that finding yourself, finding your religion or whatever is like finding your room in a big house, right? So he goes over that, and then he ends up saying, when you have reached your own room, be kind to those who have chosen different doors and to those who are still in the hall. And I really, really, that resonated with me because through my experience with religion and family and friends, it's kind of been forced down your throat a little bit. And there's always been a little bit of a lack of respect, myself included. When I was in a dark place, I was like, oh, how dare they like tell me about all of this stuff or whatever. And he sets the ground rules before he even starts the book of be respectful to another person, regardless of what religion they are, regardless of what they're on a scale from 1 to 10, how religious they are. If they have no religion, it's okay. Like, it's all right to be a different individual. And I like that he says that before he even begins. And then he goes into some of it, and he's like, I'm not like a woman, so I can't discuss some of these terms and some of these things. Like, I have nothing to say about it. And I thought that was very respectful, and very upstanding to know that this book was written in the 40s.
What a gentleman. Just kidding.
No. But yeah, what we would consider a gentleman now?
Yeah.
Yes. That was very prestigious of him. And I think that we can learn a lot from that. Just having a respect. If somebody's uncomfortable speaking about something, it's okay. They don't have to. And it's okay to have different views on all of these things. And I don't know, that was relieving, I guess, because it's never felt like that growing up.
Yeah. And that's kind of why he went to mention the distinction between gentlemen, because he did talk about using the word Christian. That. Like, there'll be times when people refer to someone as a Christian and just meaning that they are good-natured, I guess, or like, I don't know. He mentioned something along those.
It's about being good or bad.
Something like that, and he was because sometimes Christians within the Christians themselves will say, "Oh, that man is not a Christian because,"
I highlighted that
and
part
that's
too.
why he mentions the whole gentleman thing, and he's like, you can more clearly say that they are a bad Christian versus that they are not a Christian,
Right.
and but even then he goes on to mention it's like only like we are not one to judge as to what their relationship is with as a Christian. He's
Yeah.
like, so you kind of just leave it as is. People may be in different stages of their path, and it is what it is.
Yeah. That quote that quote says, "When a man who accepts Christian doctrine lives unworthily of it, it is much clearer to say that he is a bad Christian than to say he is not a Christian."
Yeah.
Oh, that's confusing now. Hold on. Only a question of using words that we can all understand what is being said. When a man who accepts the Christian doctrine lives unworthily of it, it's much clearer. Oh, so it's opposite then of what we just said?
No. How so?
It is much clearer to say that he is a bad Christian
Yes.
than to say that he is not a Christian.
That's what he was trying to clear up. That's what I said right now. That like kind of when using the term "he's a gentleman" is like if you're saying he's good natured or whatever, that's more opinion based. And when you're saying that man is not a Christian, it's usually because you're disagreeing with him and you're saying he's not a Christian.
Oh,
You
so
know?
it's better to say that he's a bad Christian.
Yes, but
I
even
understand.
then, even then, he goes on later to say, he's like, even though you would want to say this, and this would be a more clearer statement, who are we to judge also what a good Christian and bad Christian is?
Right.
And it's kind of just,
I
Yeah,
understand it better.
all right.
Thus why we talk about it.
Uh-huh. The next part is, well, I guess the first chunk of it, first chapter of book 1 is the law of human nature. And that one pretty much goes on to say that we all kind of will bicker and quarrel about little things like, oh, I was sitting there first, or let me have some of yours, I gave you some of mine, or that isn't fair, or whatever. And he mentions how everyone uses these, whether you're educated, non-educated, kids, adults, and that in itself tries to show that there's proof for us having some sort of internal standard that we're all trying to live by, and that we assume everyone else knows it without actually stating it explicitly,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And so that was like already, I think when the first time I heard this, I found it super fascinating because it was kind of like, it was hard to deny that was wrong. And even I think I would have thought like, okay, we're taught all this, but I think we would come to a point where there's still something like that, some sort of internal thing that you're like, well, no, like, I don't know if animals have this or not. Like, would an animal be like, hey, like, I was sitting there first, and I know they kind of, you can see animal behaviors get upset, but I don't know that internal thing where you feel you're being treated unfairly and that the other one should know that this standard was there. Like, how dare you ignore this standard? You know what I
I
mean?
kind of think that they do. Doesn't he, or was I reading something else? This is what happens when you read multiple things at the same time. But I had thought that he actually discussed the only difference between animals and humans. Was it in this book?
I don't remember.
But
No.
it does go over something about animals having the same, or maybe I just like bound it together, right? But animals do have that that ability, right? They have that alpha beta thing going on, and they're kind of like, no, this is my area, this is my territory, back up, know your place. And then the other one wants to challenge it, right? Like, it's a thing that happens. You want to try to push those boundaries to see how far you can get.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't really remember exactly where or what, but when you just said that right now, I was like, oh, wait, I know this.
And
Go ahead.
well, so just establishing the whole human nature part, he kind of goes in a lot into different scenarios and different ways that we all can't seem to ignore the fact that there is some sort of standard that we all should adhere to. And then that goes into the next part. Excuse me. Is the law of morality. Is that what it was? And that one was fascinating to me too, because it almost goes on to say, what is it, like instinct? And this is where it's like instinct versus what is the word? Like, I don't know if it was like action, but pretty much whenever you're in a situation. So let's say you see somebody that needs help, and by seeing that person that needs help,
You hear them. He says you hear them call out. They're yelling for help. And you have two choices. Your brain gives you two choices. It's either you go and you help them and you put yourself in danger, or you ignore them and they get hurt or something like that, right?
correct. So it goes on to kind of say that you're gonna put, you don't want to help, obviously, because you're gonna put yourself into an unsafe situation. But the correct thing to do is to go help, and kind of goes on to simply define what morality is pretty much those two voices kind of going like, your instinct is telling you to stay safe, but then the morality part is just telling you to help the person. And it's usually the correct thing to do is the
hard one.
well, the one you least want to do. So you don't want to help them because you want to stay safe, but that's the one that you know you should do. And that's kind of that standard again that's present in all of us that I guess we
Your morals, your
Tend
moral
to-
values.
tend to ignore, I guess, to an extent. And he goes on to mention it that, like, if I like the music analogy because we're both music people, but meaning that, let's say on a piano, all the keys were our instincts, and this instinct tells you to stay safe, this one tells you to do blah blah blah, it tells you to eat, tells you to sleep, I don't know, all the instinctual stuff. And then morality is like the music, the sheet of music. And so goes on to give the analogy that when you are presented with such situations, the music is telling you to play certain notes, and that those notes are correct in this scenario. And further along, that same action could be incorrect in another scenario, meaning now it's a different song. So each key on the piano, it's not like this key is always right and this key is always wrong. And I think that's one of those misconceptions that we say, like, oh, as a Christian or whatever, you can't do this, or you're not supposed to do that. And like, it depends what the music is calling for. Sometimes it is okay to do this, and sometimes it is not. And it's, at least from what I've gotten, it shouldn't be out of convenience, because it was convenience, then again, it's just the louder voice again. So it's usually the whisper voice, or the voice you're trying to be like, hey, shh.
No. Yeah, I agree. And we end up seeing this a lot in rules, right? So I'm a big rule follower. But sometimes those rules can't always be adhered to because it doesn't call for it in that situation. And that's where you end up having to trust your morality, right? And your own decision making. Okay, so like a car is burning on the freeway and you see it and you need to get those people out. Is it okay to go 70 miles per hour when it says 60 miles per hour because you need to get there quickly? Right? Mm-hmm. So that's like a simple rule that we encounter daily with like speed limits, right? There's an emergency. Your child is in grave danger. You need to throw on those emergency lights and go. You can't just adhere to something that's there, a rule that has been set for your normal day, right? Like, you have to be able to make those decisions and trust your morality, I guess, in order to make your life move along.
Yeah, and
But then there can be some rationalization, right? Like
Well,
you're gonna end up getting some people be like, thinking that, oh well, I'm just breaking the rules because of this or that. Did you hear what I just said?
yeah.
Just that goes back to one of our other podcast guys.
Yeah, and I was going to get to that too, that you get people starting to take advantage. But again, I think comes though back to the morality. If you're trying to justify it as something else, like, oh, well, I'm late for work. Like late for work, I wouldn't say is a moral or
Moral
immoral
dilemma.
Yeah, and so
Right.
you either kind of suck it up, get up earlier, do something else, change. But why is it now like a matter of this comes back again to the voice, like probably the night before. If you wake up late and the night before you're like, the voice is telling you, oh, go to sleep early because you keep waking up late, and then you end up
But
trying to
those
speak to
true
work.
crime things.
And well, yeah, whatever it is. But I think it's just kind of going back to owning that decision. Don't try to blame it on so and so or blah blah blah, this and that. It's just
Yeah.
deal with your
accept responsibility for your actions.
and having to listen to the little whisper voice.
The whisper voice.
Yeah, maybe we can give it a name or something, or maybe it'll just be the whisper voice.
That sounds creepy.
It kind of is creepy.
Wait, is the whisper voice the good voice or the bad voice?
Should be the good voice. That's the one you try to ignore. You're like, shh, shut up. I don't want to do this. Like,
I wonder if some people do it so often that
that's a good point. Like if it
That-
gets
that-
stronger and then the voice like
hey, don't
is-
lose my place.
is heard easier.
That's my bookmark. Okay. That's okay. I know where I'm at now. 2.
Oh, it's,
You can undo it. What are you looking for?
probably just listening to about some objections, but I forgot what the objections were. Oh, and I think that was it. The right notes and wrong notes. All right, well, that might be most of it, at least for book one. Book one was pretty short, and I think was still kind of establishing some ground rules as to what to expect, and so what's internally
Can
in
I?
us, and
I'm going to look at some of it because I did write some things down that I want to discuss with another human being, not just writing it down myself, you know. So I work from home, y'all. So I don't get a lot of people time. Well, a lot of screen people time, but not people. Let's see. Oh, we already covered that. Oh, I thought that was really cool. He talks about quarreling. Quarreling means trying to show that the other man is in the wrong. And he says there's no sense in trying to do that unless you've had some sort of agreement on what is right and wrong. And I was like, holy cow, that's like an aha moment, because you can beat a dead horse, right? I've seen so many different quotes that are like, oh, there's no point in arguing unless unless you know that the person is going to understand it.
mm-hmm.
Right? And yes, that's a big part of it. But at the same time, like, how are they going to understand if you haven't set these parameters? But at that point, when you're already discussing it, sometimes it's too late to go back and say, okay, let's set the ground rules. This is what is correct and this is what is incorrect. Do we agree on this? Right? Like, yes, hypothetically, this just makes so much sense. But like in a real life situation, you're like, oh shit, how am I going to be able to go back now? Like, okay, let's stop talking about this. Let's go back and establish our ground rules. And then I think you have to be in a certain kind of relationship to do so, right? Like married couples. I think that would be a really good one. Let's talk about this. What is your right? What is your wrong? Now, this is my right and this is my wrong. So once you guys can establish your definitions, then you can quarrel, I guess, if you must, right? But I think that if you already clarify that, then there's no point in quarreling. You don't need to have that. I mean, some people are going to probably still do it because that's how they are, but I don't know. I
No,
thought that was fascinating.
Go back. You said something. Oh, what did you say about unless they can, like not arguing unless what?
It says there would be no sense in trying to do that unless you and he had some sort of agreement
I don't know,
as
but you
to
said
what
something
right
else
and wrong
separate
are.
from, like unless you know the other person can change or something like that.
Oh, it was like those memes, I guess, or memes, whatever they're called, that I've been seeing, and it's like unless they're able to comprehend that. It's like arguing with a 5-year-old. Are you going to sit there and argue with a 5-year-old when they have no concept of
Yeah.
this part of the world, right? Like,
Correct. Yeah, and I've thought this too, with just stuff that goes on in the world. I guess mostly internet. That there's now people are just you're oblivious to wanting to be proven wrong.
I thought it was interesting. Our dogs are yelling.
I keep hearing this.
It was another interesting one that I wrote down is we can only disobey the law of human nature, because the other, like the laws of nature, you can't disobey. Like you can't disobey gravity.
That's right.
And I thought that was an important topic that he brought that up a couple of times. In that, I'm gonna shut the door because the dogs are yelling and it's a little bit loud.
And by the way, they're yelling because an ice cream truck's passing, not just because they're
fine.
being attacked or mauled by wild coyotes and.
Yeah, no. Wild coyotes, they're gone now.
Yeah. Well, I was saying that.
Oh, that's my chair, guys. Jeez.
That falsification is a word I think we all got to get in our vocabulary. And falsification pretty much means that you can the thing, whatever you're trying to prove or disprove, has like a rubric pretty much, that if it falls under this category, then it's this, and if it falls in the other way, then it's that. So for example, like here I have my bottle of Pellegrino. Now, by just basic assumption, you could say it's in a bottle of Pellegrino, so it's Pellegrino. But what if there was something else inside? What if I had another clear liquid? There's all sorts of clear liquids I can have. But by following the rubric, it's going to fall into one way or another. So does it have sugar? Okay, then yes or no. And if it does, okay, then it probably wasn't Pellegrino. It's probably some other type of fizzy drink. So it could be Sprite or champagne or I don't know, something. But under following that rubric, you keep being there has to be a way to prove one way or another. And I think that's one of the things we've kind of lost. Like, we start only acknowledging the evidence that proves our point, but when there's something else, like, oh well, no, that doesn't count. So even if somebody tasted it and they're like, it's sweet, and I'm like, well, but it's in a Pellegrino bottle, so it has to be Pellegrino. It's like, yeah, but Pellegrino isn't sweet. And that's my only fighting point. But it's in a Pellegrino bottle. Like, that's what else could it be?
So what part is falsification then?
Falsification is being able to have those two standards. So again, if it's sweet,
it's not Pellegrino.
Yeah, it's likely not Pellegrino. So then you can go down a whole other list. Okay, what are things that are not sweet? It's Pellegrino's probably out of the question now, even though it is on a Pellegrino bottle. So kind of going along to what you said, that's kind of the thing with arguments, that if they have that capability, that they know that you can, by presenting something, you know they're going to accept it as, oh, like, oh, my bad, my fault. Like, I thought because of this that it was whatever.
So the definition says it's a noun, the action of falsifying information or a theory, an investigation into fraud and the falsification of records. So bending them, making them.
Maybe that wasn't. It's.
I don't know. You said we got to get this in our vocabulary, so I wanted to look up the actual.
You're right. And it's not. It's falsifying. Look up falsifying. It's something with the word false, and I know it's.
Isn't that like the verb of it though? Let me see. Hold on. Yeah, verb. Falsify, falsifying, falsified. To alter, information or evidence as to mislead a laboratory which was alleged to have falsified test results, forge or alter in a document fraudulently as an adjective,
No.
falsified.
Look up.
Prove a statement or theory to be false. The hypothesis is falsified by the evidence. Fail to fulfill a hope, fear, or expectation. Remove the justification for. Changes falsify individual expectations.
Yeah, that's I think the definition. It's like a falsifiability. So something has to have the ability to be proven one way or another. You can't just prove. You can't just go in one way. So meaning, whatever point you're trying to prove, you have to take in both sides. You're not just going to take the information that is convenient to you or proving your point. Once you come across something that and I don't know if it mentions it in this book also, and I heard it in another book. So another one is, like they used to say, all swans are white. And so by saying that, you're pretty much saying all swans are white. But as soon as you see one swan that is a different color, now you can't say all swans are white. Does that make sense? And by seeing a black swan or a blue swan or a pink swan, whatever, you can't ignore that one. Like, oh, well, that one's not a swan because it's not white. Does that make sense?
So does it kind of go into like overgeneralizations? So all swans are white is an overgeneralization.
No, but there are
exceptions to the rule. There are exceptions to, like, there are this actually just came up. Are we allowed to talk about just like different stuff or?
Yeah, sure.
They just found so like axolotls, they're like a thing now, right?
What'd you call me?
They're salamanders.
What? Are they really?
Yeah, I think they are. I'm pretty sure that they're related anyway. They're in like the same family. So they just found like a different colored one. And they're like, wow, it's the exception to the rule because all of the rest are this and there's this one. And I'm like, well, that's the only one that we have seen.
So yeah, that's a good way of seeing it. So before that point, you could have said all of these are this color.
Appear to be, yeah.
Well, even then, before we actually know it, I guess, or before we've come across it, like that's the most knowledge we have of it. All right. Oh yes. All swans. Yeah. All swans are white. But as soon as you come across one that is black, you can't say that statement. All swans are white cannot be a true statement anymore.
Correct.
And so I think that's kind of the point when I'm trying to make with when people try to ignore evidence, like, oh, all swans are white, and then you show them the black swan, and then you try to ignore it. Oh, well, that one doesn't count because he lives in a different part of the world or something like that. It's like, but that's not what you said.
Still a swan, like it's still
right. You could have said all North American swans are white or something. Then something like that. But it just makes us be a little more clear of our words and also what you're taking in or what evidence or what you're willing to take in. If you're pretty much arguing with somebody that is gonna take that off, then like. That's why I think this book tries to clear up a lot of these things beforehand, before you get into it and you start making the exceptions then. And so, yeah, that was pretty much my point on
being open-minded.
Falsifiability, I think, is the word.
Okay. I think I have different terminology that I would probably utilize. Because that word doesn't resonate with me just yet. Maybe I need to keep on reading the book.
And I've heard it more through science stuff. Like I think Neil deGrasse Tyson has mentioned it a few times. That when people ignore stuff that
like how you're saying all of it, it's very scientific because, I mean, like you look at mean, median, and mode, right? So what is the most common thing that you see? But then it's not out of the ordinary to document something out of the ordinary, right? Like you're still going to, you have to look at it with variables and outliers because that's what makes everything. Like there is that, and it would be ignorant to ignore it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like that's how come, I don't want to use this word. But indoctrination, I think that the reason why I didn't want to use it is it's very powerful. Like it's a very strict
People get defensive over
boundary line. Yeah. And we'll probably hear, I always get myself in trouble on these things. Anyway, going through that much parochial school, I felt now in my older years, I felt indoctrinated because there were things that I didn't want to accept. Like I could not accept it because it wasn't what I was taught. And the thing is that it's very important to be open-minded and to just because if you did it didn't happen to you, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen to other people. And I feel like there were just big constraints on that kind of upbringing. I mean, it was to the point where I would tell my parents, like, you're wrong. You don't go to church every Sunday and da-da-da. Like, you have this little tiny 6-year-old telling you this. And, like, maybe they had something else going on that they couldn't
the right notes
go, you know, and it just... I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Now, like, coming out of it, right? And looking at it from an outsider's perspective, analyzing the life of a 6-year-old child that was going to parochial school and thinking that her parents were just, like, absolutely going to go to hell because they weren't following things by the book the way that I was taught. That's not good. That is not good. And that's cleared up, like, in the preface here. And I think... that might be a reason. That's how you were saying, is there any other reason that you would agree to talk about this? Yeah, that. Like, I'm hoping that maybe somebody else can feel more comfortable in their, or open-minded in their learning of, or accepting. I don't even know. Comfortable, all of that.
So see, that's, I think, another one of those misconceptions that I feel, in a way, clears up or at least shines a little more light, is that a lot of times I think religion will try to keep you away from certain things because, I don't know, it seems like, not for lack of a better term, like it's afraid, or like as a institution, it's afraid that you won't believe it anymore. And me, I think with this book, it almost kind of doesn't care. Like it shows you whatever, and it's still confident enough that after all that, it's still going to come out on top. And without having to hide you from stuff, and without having to ignore certain things. And it does clear it up that in certain, like with the notes, in certain situations, these things are going to be correct. And in other situations, these things are going to be incorrect. And I guess you got to learn more context. And that's also, I think, one of the things we've learned through their podcasts is from talking to people, is that context is important. It's not just whatever you see right away that is a good or bad thing. It's what position or what frame of mind, what environment were they in that makes that decision happen.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because you have to find a completely neutral space in your brain to accept that from other people, right? Because of course we all have our opinions, and just because we have our opinion doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. It's an opinion, right? But everybody has them, and it's what's interesting about how society works. And he goes into that also, saying that about what you had said about, like, oh, I had given you a piece of my orange, or I gave you some, so you should give me some. Well, it's going to be different in different cultures also, right? And it's being able to accept what they have learned and coming to, like, some kind of neutrality. So it's definitely a difficult place for some of us to get to.
Yeah. Well, I really do enjoy this book. If you guys would like to read along, the next one will be book 2. What is the name of book 2?
Oh, no. It's right before the pencil.
That?
Yeah, I barely put it there. There. Oh, 2 pages.
Oh, book 2 is What Christians Believe. So now I guess after the ground rules have been set up, now it's going to go a little bit into the actual belief. So Send in your thoughts. You can send them in through email, info@omni-versal.com, or send us a DM on Instagram. We're at Versal Arts there, and we'd love to hear what other people's thoughts are, especially from the different perspectives: Christian, non-Christian, believers, non-believers, and so on, especially if you've read this book. All right, see you guys next time.
Bye.